So, good morning. I just got woken up by a rainstorm. Ugh. I saw in the weather report that it was going to rain today, but I decided to sleep in here because it's kind of nice to be in a tent when it rains. But this is kind of intense. It's been raining gently on and off for hours. I've been waking up and going to sleep. I'm staying. Good morning, Tom. Hi. Good morning, John. I've been staying at my parents' house for about a month now. They, like most modern people, really like air conditioning. I'm allergic to air conditioning. It makes me have a headache and feel lethargic. So the room that I stayed in last year, sorry, not functioning yet. The room I stayed in last year, I don't even know if you can hear me. Yeah, good morning. I love how I'm like in a forest at my parents' house. The room I stayed in last year, the uptake vent for the furnace is right above the bed, and even though I closed them, the output vent is like whistling all the time. So about a week after getting here, I decided to set up my tent because my parents have 9 acres and like the back 2 acres and one of the front acres is left wild. I think that's about how it works. Wild. There's a bunch of wild roses out there, lots of wild poison ivy, lots of wild blackberries. It's beautiful. But I just, I left the window open, but that whistling and the humming just annoyed me. So I set up my tent, and I've been sleeping outside, and I come out every night, and the yard is filled with fireflies, which is just fucking gorgeous. I mean, it's not like a few fireflies, it's like thousands. They're 100,000 fireflies, like the magnetic field songs. They're fluttering around and flickering, and I tried to film them last night. It's just stupid. They just look like dots on a screen. It does not at all capture It does not at all capture the majesty of 100,000 fireflies. I just turn on my light so you can see my little light set up in my tent. Though it's daylight. Oh, you can see my hammock over there. I've got a hammock in the trees. Bonjour, Jean. Buongiorno, Francesco. Buongiorno, Joseph. Shit, I don't need the light on right now. I'm being silly. I'm just waking up. So I came out here and I started sleeping, and it was amazing after spending just a week in the house. The whistling sounds of the air conditioning, the fans, just the electricity hum. Yeah. And I came outside and just like had this kind of peace, listening to the crickets and the birds and watching the fireflies blinking outside the tent. It's been very nice. But again, I'm like right behind my parents' house. It's one of my favorite songs in the world that often makes me cry is called David's Last Summer by a band called Pulp. It's like 10 minutes long and it's all about nostalgia. And there's a line where he's talking about, why don't we set up a tent outside and pretend we're somewhere foreign, but we can still go into the house and use the fridge in case we get hungry or too hot. this time of being here, of coming from Mexico, which I had a great time in Mexico, but there were challenges. I have been so profoundly, I mean, obviously everything else that's happened in me getting here, I've been so profoundly aware of my privilege, the luxury of my life, even though I'm not somebody who has things anymore. I mean, I'm a homeless traveler or whatever, but I'm very homeful, as one of my traveler friends said. When I was younger, I used to always say I'm home wherever I am. But the luxury that I can just like spend the year in a nude beach in Mexico while everyone's in terrified lockdown, and then come to Indiana, which is not a place I ever wanted to come when I was younger, but last year I did this reconnaissance mission of somehow healing my relationship with Indiana and my home that I grew up in and my parents, and just in time, of course, to be able to come back here and enjoy it. It's been so nice, and have the luxury to be in this big house with Wi-Fi and a big refrigerator with endless food. I get so fat when I stay here. It's amazing. And just so many clothes and electronics and TV shows, watching movies, eating. I've been making these amazing like health food bars with my mom. Making my own health food bars, making my own tea blends, my sleepy blends, and getting all these herbs. It's amazing. And Amazon delivery stations are just a few miles away, literally, these huge Amazon buildings. So we just get all the Amazon junk. It's delivered right here. And I set up a tent and a hammock in the backyard, and I can go outside and be in the silence, listen to the dogs wailing, listen to the coyotes killing rabbits, the screeching sound. I can wake up and walk out and watch thousands of fireflies flickering in the backyard, and Saturn and Jupiter right over to the left, and the little sickle moon to the right. One of the experiences I had last year when I came back from Southeast Asia was, when I was in Southeast Asia, there was this feeling of everything being very exotic. I'm like, wow, I'm in Southeast Asia. There's these rice paddies and those gorgeous sunsets of the pollution. It is glowing off the rice paddies. It was just, good morning, Gabriel. It was just amazing to see like how different the world was in Southeast Asia, because I'd never been there. You know, I've been to China, and I remember in China I felt like I was on an alien planet. It was such a totally, yeah, Gabriel, I'm camping in my parents' backyard in Indiana. Yeah, I had this feeling that everything in Southeast Asia was exotic. And I realized that, of course, a lot of the reason I travel is for that feeling of exotic, of being somewhere totally new and different, and that kind of beauty and reverence that happens towards things when you think it's exotic, when you're traveling. So when I decided I was coming back to America, I was like, you know, there's nothing that should stop me from treating this country as being exotic, even though I've been in this country for a long time. Most of my life has been spent in this country. It has countless things that I haven't seen and haven't experienced. And if I bring that kind of reverence and awe to it, that like this is a foreign country, because it is, everything's changing all the time. And I'm like, you know, this is a foreign country too. So I started treating where I went and everything I was seeing and everything I was doing in America like a foreign country. And it was really interesting. And when I decided to come to Indiana, when I decided to come to, there's a yard. Look, it's a yard with the lines of lawnmower. But that's exotic. Like, and when I walk out in the backyard and there's 100,000 fireflies flickering. I mean, like, that's a unique, amazing experience. Like, a lot of you city people don't ever get to see that. I mean, even a lot of suburban people, my parents who live in this house, they don't walk outside at midnight and watch the fireflies. I held my mom's hand because she was kind of afraid of the dark, and I took her out into the backyard, and she just like exploded with like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I was like, yeah, this is totally amazing. You know, the people who live here don't get to experience it. Not to saying that everybody should camp outside in their backyard if they live in the suburbs. Do you have 100,000 fireflies, Tom? Right now, Tom, they're flickering in the trees. It looks almost like Christmas lights. It's amazing. I mean, I'm exaggerating. But again, the back field, they just flicker, 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 flicker. It's so gorgeous. Anyway, I've been super grateful. And I've been working really hard. God, my belly feels so big right now. I went to Ted Turner's Montana Steakhouse, bison, whatever, last night. And I eat so much here. I get so fat. But I've been working really hard. I didn't take really good before photos, but my mother has gardens all around the house. And since I've been here, I took one of her back gardens. There's like 4 plots. Well, one was a big compost heap that is now just totally overgrown with weeds, but it's got lots of compost underneath it. Oh, that's a good point. A desert state. Okay, so he's American. Eric, well, I was in Thailand last year. There was a man who was taking some classes with me from Abu Dhabi. Yeah, Phil, it doesn't really, it feels fat to me. I know that it doesn't look fat to anyone else's standard of fat, but my pants are tight on me and, it's fat for me. So many fireflies here at night. Good, I'm glad. Anyway, there was this man who was in this class with me from Abu Dhabi. And of course, I just loved him and wanted to spend more time with him. But he was like, he would tell me about his healing modalities, which were all about beating people up and leaving bruises and scars all over them. And I was just like, yeah, I don't know if I need that kind of love right now. But he was super hot and very modest, always wore long pants, with socks on and long sleeve shirts. And I was just like, oh no, he didn't always wear long sleeve shirts because he had incredibly hairy arms. That's kind of one of the things that drove my mind crazy about him. Anyway, he was telling me that in the desert of what we call the Middle East, the desert countries of Arabia, the color of paradise is green. That paradise is a land where everything is green, where there's trees and grass and flowers and plants. And I was like, of course, if a culture has lived for generations in a desert, of course, the idea of paradise is where everything is green. So I was telling my mother that because, like, here in Indiana, she's always said, oh, Indiana's beautiful. And I'm like, Indiana's horrible. I hate Indiana. And it feels bad to say that now. Sorry. Anyway, I used to really hate Indiana. I don't hate Indiana now. But I never appreciated the beauty here because of whatever. I wanted something else. And I was not able to appreciate. That's the crux of everyone's life. We want something else, so we don't appreciate the good of what we have, right? That was the project last year, to be like, this is a foreign country, and I can appreciate the majesty and the beauty and the wonder and the whatever of being here in Indiana. And the thunder of the thunderstorms in the summer. And right now I feel like I'm really getting to have that experience, that I'm seeing how beautiful it is here, or it can be here. There's still a lot of stuff that, like, I was telling this story yesterday to my mom, that the reason I left New York was not that New York wasn't good enough or I didn't want New York. The main reason was that I had been doing New York for a while, right? New York's great. I was doing New York for a while. I was having a great New York experience, but there's so many other worlds to live in. There's so many other life experiences to have. And I just didn't think I wanted to spend the rest of my life having the New York life experience. There's so many other worlds out there. Yeah. Gardening is so wonderful. And so I'm so grateful that I get to have that Italian experience and Southeast Asia experience and Mexico experience and Indiana experience. The fact that I'm able to come back here and love my parents and be loved by my parents. I reflected yesterday on... my dad took me aside 2 nights ago and he gave me a lot of appreciation for being here in the way that he can in his language, and helping and working and just, spending time here. And it made me remember that when I was a kid, he said so many things to me that really strengthened that whole idea in me that I had to prove myself worthy to be alive. Like, I've lived most of my life with the idea that I don't deserve to be alive and that I have to prove my worthiness to be alive. And that's a fundamental thing to a whole bunch of, especially like in the conversations that are happening right now, there's a whole bunch of people who don't feel like they're worthy to be alive. And certainly in the LGBT experience, there's a whole bunch of people who just don't feel like they're worthy to be alive. And I was very much raised with that idea. And I always applied that to my father, but also lots of other... maybe my father put the seed in, or maybe karma put the seed in, past lives, who the fuck knows. But I grew up constantly feeling like I wasn't even worthy to be here in this body, on this planet, that I had to make excuses for my very existence constantly, and that I had to act in such a way to somehow make myself worthy of life. But my father certainly said things, or I took things my father said as certainly strengthening that. And it was so funny, while I was gardening yesterday, I reflected on him giving me so much appreciation and being so great, telling me how grateful he was that I was here. And I was like, wow, I guess I don't have to work so hard just to be alive now. Connecticutans, oh Connecticutans, hello Connecticutans, be friends. We met through Dominic Vine. Oh my God, it's Pride weekend. Great, I'm telling a Pride story. That's wonderful. I didn't even think about that. I love you just for being you, Eric, and all of us. Thank God we fucking existed, right? We're living in an amazing period of transition in the world. It might not be entirely fun, but nothing is entirely fun. But wow, isn't it? Aren't we lucky? Don't we have such great luck to be able to see the world changing under our feet and around our head? It's been fun. Now it's going to be something else, and it'll also be fun. It's just going to be something else. Anyway, we don't need to go into all that. But I did want to go into one of the things yesterday I was doing while I was working in the garden. So like I've revitalized a 30 by 30 foot plot. There was 3 raised beds. My mother was planting stuff in one of them, and yet the corners of it weren't dug out from the weeds, and the other 2 were 2 feet high in weeds. And then there was a whole other plot next to her that used to be a garden that was totally covered in weeds and sumac, which are these little trees that had taken over the whole thing. They were like 7 or 8 feet tall everywhere. I don't know how, like 50 of them. They're just insane weed trees. Not that they're bad, they produce vitamin C, but they were just being greedy. That's the way I looked at it. They were just being greedy and taking over all the space, all the nutrients. So one of the projects I've had is when I'm digging up the weeds and like creating beds, because I created a whole other bed and put sweet potatoes in it, is I constantly encounter these roots of these weeds. So I think I'm encountering roots of bindweed, of milkweed, of the sumac. The sumac's the main one, because like when I go to dig up the trunk of it, the trees are like that big around. There's some that are that big around, but most of them are like that big around. When I go to dig up the trunks of them, they're connected to these, root networks that spread out in every direction, and I'll like lift and I'll pull up the roots, and it will like sometimes stretch. They'll be superficial and they'll just go along the ground. So I keep finding them and finding them and finding them and pulling them up. And yesterday, I've been doing this for weeks now. And yesterday I found one little nub that I had cut off, because when I first got here, I just cut the tops off of all of them with nippers. And then I've been working to get the rest of it out piece by piece as I need to. And yesterday there was one little nub that I was like, oh, what's that? And I hit it with a pickaxe and pulled it up, and it exposed this huge root system between the two beds that I had revitalized. And it was just crazy. It was, it was crazy to how many roots I pulled out yesterday. And I thought of that Buddhist practice. They talk about the roots of suffering is one of the translations. The roots of suffering are greed, hatred, and delusion. And I was like, this is how you root out greed. Because it's something like, when I started doing the retreats, it was very easy for me to notice hatred inside of myself. And I worked with hatred a lot. I thought hatred was a great idea when I was younger, and I was a very hateful teenager. So it was very easy for me to work with hatred because I was very familiar with hatred. But greed is slipperier a lot of the times because we think it's good. Like hatred we often think is good too. When you like hatred, I was going to say when you're racist, but I'm like, we're all racist. Whenever we hate something, we're usually righteous about hating it. We're justified in hating it. So we think it's a good idea. But for some reason, hatred for me was easier to identify as a bad thing. I was able to, again, like that 3-month retreat I was in was during the election period of 2016. So, like, specifically when the person who won the election for the president of the United States, I cried a lot. And then over the next few days, I just noticed how angry I was for him being elected and all the people who would elect a schoolyard bully and all those things. But then I noticed I hated him in my heart, and I noticed what it felt like to hate him. And I was like, I don't want to hate him. Hating feels so bad. And so I started looking like, was there ever an appropriate time to hate? And I tried to put myself in every situation I could imagine. Like somebody did something horrible to somebody and therefore I should hate them because they did something horrible. It was never a good idea to hate. It always felt horrible to hate. So that became very clear to me. But greed has been tricky. And for some people, it's a different trip, right? But to be able to look at greed in myself, like what is greed? How do I apply greed? How does greed work? And again, this is just if you reduce things into the idea of the roots of suffering are greed, hatred, and delusion. Delusion I also have kind of a good grip on because I love fantasies. Like I want to be a wizard. I'm a wizard! And I really do, maybe in a schizophrenic way, I really do believe in aspects of reality, dimensions, demons, fairies, angels, all the fantasies humans have ever come up with and other crazy shit just I've made up, I believe in, and I interact with it as if it's as real as dirt and sky and trees, because that just makes the world more interesting to me. But I do understand that to a certain degree, that is what they talk about when they talk about delusion, willful confusion. But there's other things that they lump under willful confusion and delusion, like the idea of separation and the idea of the individual, which a lot of people are just like, no, that's real. But greed has been really tricky for me. So it was a really nice experience while pulling up these roots that were being greedy and trying to steal all the sunlight, trying to steal all of the nutrients. These trees aren't bad. Sumac aren't bad. They're just not very useful, and they don't deserve to take everything. And so I've been using them as metaphors for a whole bunch of things. Thank you, sumac. Your time here is over. And every time I see them, I'm crunching them, killing them, pulling them up. The stuff outside of the garden, I'm trying some poison my dad got for me. Hi, Ran, love you. It's just funny when I was just tending to the garden yesterday. I was going to work on the fence a little bit more because I need to rabbit-proof the deer fence I put up with my dad. My mom's like, I've wanted a fence on my garden for almost 30 years. Thank you so much. So, it feels so good to do this for my mom. That I was able to find one little spider vein of roots that spread through this whole thing. Anyway, do you think I should go out? Do you guys want to go see the outside now in the rain? I can walk naked in the rain and then go see my parents. Here, look. Hi, whales. Hello, whales. This is my killing off the grass up here, poor thing. Oh. We're gonna go for a walk in the rain. And I encourage all of you to go outside and be naked in your yards in the rain. Or even not in the rain. Oh. See, it's not so loud when you come outside. Let me close this real quick. Oh, there's my little tent for you. And my parents' house. You can see it over there. Oh, see, the drama inside of the tent just sounds quiet and beautiful out here. So this is the compost heap. And there's this big, beautiful squash that has volunteered itself. The flower looks a little wet. That's compost. This was a garden that was a compost heap as well, I guess. And that's a bunch of comfrey growing. This is one of those sumacs that I have been weeding out. But look at that. These are just wild roses. There's wild roses. This is all the back acreage that's wild. So I never had a relationship with the wild acreage when I lived with my parents. It's so nice to be here in the wild acreage. And there's wild roses everywhere. These are these are the roots that I have been rooting out. Look at all these fucking roots. Look at all these roots that I've been pulling out. The roots of hatred, the roots of greed, the roots of delusion, and dead branches. This is all the stuff I've been pulling out since I've been here in the last, it's almost been 4 weeks, I guess. So this little spot here is kind of what the wild garden looked like. This is Vitex, all this dead stuff. It'll be revitalized soon. That's some milkweed. All these little dead stalks you're seeing, those are the sumacs that I cut all the tops off. Oh, this is so calming. That's nice. And then this is the fence I put up. You know, and fences are prisons, so it's kind of sad that I had to put the garden in a prison, but it's to keep the deer out because the deer, want to eat everything. Ooh. This is a daylily that my mother loves. She said it's called Cosmic Pinwheel. I was like, Cosmic Pinwheel? That sounds pretty nice. Here, let's do a... Yeah. I'm gonna have a bonfire, Mr. Tom. There are a couple paths my dad cut through the back acreage, but it's very filled with poison ivy. Look at all the wild roses, all those little pink things you can see, those little clusters of flowers. Those are wild roses. So yeah, this is the garden. We're gonna put a door here, but we haven't yet. That's fine. There's a million things to do. I'm like, that's the important part is getting everything planted, which at this point we've gotten everything planted. This is the rabbit proofing. So this is the only side of the rabbit proofing. Yep. This is the rabbit proofing that I've put up so far, but obviously the door isn't sealed yet, and there's a whole bunch of other things that need to be done, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be better. Here's the sweet potatoes. They're very happy that they're getting water. I built all these mounds. Isn't that crazy? Rototilled the hell out of this. This is the garden bed my mother had prepared already, although I've done some more. Oh, the milkweed's falling over, poor guy. I don't want it to fall over. That's okay, though. There's so many milkweeds. My mom wanted to save the milkweeds because they're good pollinators, And that is true, but they are also weeds. And they're the food of the monarchs, but they're also weeds. They have these silly red bugs on them. These are cup plants. I don't know if you've ever seen cup plants. Cup plants can hold the water when it rains, so birds can come by and drink the water. I forgot what this guy's name is. This is Titsonia, maybe? Titsonia. Very pretty flowers. Good morning, Josh. Love you. This is all catnip. This is wonderful. I've been making tea out of catnip every night. Catnip. And this is our cucumbers. No, see, he's already holding on to this cage. We don't want you to hold on to this cage, little buddy. No. This is so funny. I'm like, no, little cucumber. We want you to hold on to this red thing. That's what we're doing. Here, come on. Come with me. There we go. Why don't you hold on to that? There you go. Little plant fingers, man. There we go. There we go. Cucumber. So we want the cucumber to climb up that. These are snap peas. See, these are little, but we've been eating a bunch of them. Yeah, they're really good. Some squash that's going to pop up there and spill out onto the ground. Some other roses. Oh, my mom's watching. Hi, Mom. This is the garden. I'm doing a live broadcast of the garden. The milkweeds are very heavy with water and falling over, but they're starting to bloom. I usually come out here in the morning and water the gardens, but I don't need to water the gardens because the rain's doing it for me. These are our sad little turnips. Who's moving down in there, huh? Turnip greens, who are being eaten up by bugs. Poor little guys. These are the beets, which look very nice. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, Jeff has an amazing garden. This is a bunch of, looks like the dahlia flowers. These are also some comfrey, a different strain with their little comfrey flowers. Big comfrey leaves. Ooh, lightning! We're gonna hear some good thunder in a second. We just planted a bunch of okra, and the okra sprouts are coming up. I have no idea if those are gonna come to fruit, but there it is. Those are the okra sprouts. These are some little carrots. Tomato. This is wood betony, one of the weeds that was in the garden that my mother planted years ago. And it's flowering. It's ready to harvest, but we have to wait till it's dry. These are some Brussels sprouts that are just popping up. Weeding out the grass, weeding out the moonflowers. We love you, moonflowers. Sorry, no, I'm just going to start weeding like crazy. These are all beans from one of my favorite foods that I make called kitchery. And I just planted the beans to see what they would grow like. I think it's amazing. The rain falls so hard that it covers the leaves with dirt. I know, it's like, look at all the weeds popping up on these mounds. See, these are the sweet potatoes, and look how the mounds are totally covered with weeds. Yesterday I weeded these mounds. So for instance, you can see these are not so totally covered, although there's a little okra there. It's just amazing, just amazing. Anyway, it's very fun to be doing this. I'm super grateful. These are where I was pulling all the roots out yesterday. You know, tracing the root lines along here, ripping up all that, tracing the root lines all through here, ripping, hitting with the pickaxe, pulling up. But there were a bunch of these little stalks you see here. They were coming up all over here and all over here. There were tons in here. So there were roots all through here. Anyway. Oh, this is kind of cute. These are all basils. Holy basil in the middle, the green basil, and rosy basils on either side. I don't know, it's just pretty nice. I'm super grateful to be gardening and working with my mom. I've done a lot of fun things with my mom over the years, like walking across Spain and going to Brazil, and now I'm gardening with her, which is fun because it's one of her greatest life joys. And you know, if somebody has a great life joy, it's really nice if you can do it with them. Because it's a way that you can just like tap into someone's happiness and be on their happiness wave. And of course, I've always liked gardening. I've just never done it much as a traveler, right? I was constantly going. So you can't really tend to a garden or harvest it. I am walking around naked in the backyard, by the way, in case you wonder. I'm not going to show that on Facebook. The dogs are crying because my mom is up and she hasn't let them out. Poor dogs, crying all the time. They stay with my sister now. Oh, look, there's other wild lilies here that are really pretty. Come here. Within the weeds, there's lots of beauty. Ooh. Gracias, Joey. Puerto Rico. So yeah. This is the little landscape I've been living in. Although I do sit with my parents and watch TV at night sometimes, and I do play video games on my Nintendo Switch. And I'm doing little audio projects, and I occasionally write. But yeah, now has not really been about the time of making videos. But one of my friends yesterday's in LA, he works in broadcasting, and he has a friend who owns a television station in Apple Valley, California. And he said they've been broadcasting my YouTube channel for months now. It's just one of their channels of their television broadcast is just my YouTube go playing continually. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. The last video I uploaded was me rototilling, and before that it was me just kind of flipping out. We're in Mercury retrograde, yes, right, and right now I also had an experience yesterday where I was like, wow, the first couple weeks I was here, I was like crying all the time. You know, not like sobbing, but just having moments of just sadness about what's going on in the world. And I noticed I hadn't cried for like weeks. I've been so busy gardening and just being here and the luxury of being here that I hadn't been crying. And so yesterday I spent some time reading news headlines and stuff on Twitter. And I started crying again, and I was like, oh, it's right there. All the injustice and fear and pain in the world, it's right there. It's still happening. Just touch into the news for a moment. But anyway, I'm super grateful to be here. Sun's in Cancer. It's about home. It's about family. Mercury is retrograde in Cancer. Venus is retrograde in Gemini. Talk about your emotions. Feel your thoughts. Take some time and meditate and just feel. Just feel. Just feel your body. Feel the physical sensations of your body. Feel the emotions. Feel the thoughts. Just feel what it feels like to exist in a body. Just spend time doing that. Don't do anything else. Just for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, put the timer on and just sit there and feel. It's an amazing meditation. It's so simple. And not all of us need to do it. There's a lot of you out there who are Cancers already, and you're like, what are you talking about? I feel all the time. That's all I'm doing is feeling. You water signs. But for those of us who aren't water signs, which, you know, what would that be? 3/4 of the world are not water signs. We don't often just take the time to just feel in the same way. So just feel. It's fun. I'm an air sign, so like it's a really big deal to me to feel. I'm like, a feeling? Wow. Wild. Yeah, I used to kind of hating the like suburban, my dad grew up in the suburbs. This is definitely not the suburbs, although the suburbs are encroaching on this place. But I did not grow up in the suburbs. I grew up surrounded by cornfields, but not like being an actual farmer either. But anyway, I used to really dislike the manicured lawn aspect, the suburban manicured lawn aspect. It used to bother me. And now that it's matured after 30 years, you know, all these trees were tiny when we moved here. All these trees were just planted. They were tiny trees. Now they're all big and wild. Like, I had to weed eat around all these things. I had to help maintain them. Good for me, right? But now they're big and beautiful. And they have this sensation of wildness. And then, you know, I just, again, like when I lived here, and just like my parents, they don't spend a lot of time out here. My mom spends time out here when she's gardening, when she takes the compost out. But being able to wake up in the morning and walk out here, and having this be my first view of the morning, this kind of wildness. And it's a wildness in Indiana, you know, it's an interstitial wildness. It's the land plots here are separated by interstitial forests. So you see, like, where that forest is, it's like 10 feet thick, maybe not even. They're not real forests, but that's the border. The fences here are little interstitial forests, and this is like an interstitial wild spot. But I'm certainly grateful to have it right now. And watch out for the poison ivy over here. And it's a rainy Saturday, so maybe we'll just take it easy, eat, and play cards. Oh, maybe, I don't know. I think it's probably a little too cold. Well, I'll do some Qigong. Yeah. Oh, you're falling over. You need to climb up, dude. Come here. Hi, Nick. Good morning. Yeah, Rewilded. Well, when I was up in Massachusetts a few years ago, I was really impressed by walking around all of the old plots of farmland near the retreat center. And it was like 150 years ago, these places were bustling community centers, gigantic farmsteads, houses everywhere. I mean, it was the equivalent of the suburbs. And now it's just wild woods. You know, it's been abandoned for a long time. Now it's like nature preserves. And there's just all these old foundations of houses. And it's just amazing to me to see that this, you know, these landscapes, even in America, we've had post-civilization in areas that were, Rewilded. The Rewilded place. This is a squash called a zucchetta, I think. They're from like Sicily, and they give off really giant Thank you, Dawn. Much love to you. Yeah, Dawn is somebody who lives in the desert. Dawn, it's very nice to share this green wetness with you. Yeah. There is, Dawn, there's always ugliness going on. There's always a tremendous amount of ugliness in the world. Right now we live in a very specific period where we're able to see it all because of social media, because of the ability for people to be like, I don't have to keep the secret anymore. I can tell you about ... all of the horror that is going on all the time, that most of us, we've all just been like, yeah, we know it's happening, but we can ignore it. And the painful thing about having to see it all the time is that in most of us, we do have some kind of moral compass. It's like, this just isn't okay. It's not okay to do this anymore. It's not okay to sit by idly and let this keep happening. So it's very nice that this is happening, all the ugliness, because the ugliness has always been there. Just like the beauty's always been there. We just take both of them for granted because it's too much to bear and we forget. But to go out and appreciate the beauty of where we have, it is a radical act of changing the world. To appreciate the life we're actually living totally changes the world. Part of the niceness and convenience that we've been trapped in, we wanted it. We wanted things to be nicer and more convenient, but it's just made us numb and blind and dumb. So it's so nice when we can do something about injustice, when we can do something about the ugliness. It's a very similar action to actually appreciating the beauty of our lives. I mean, serious, if you guys sleep in a tent out in your backyard and go out naked in the morning and walk around, if you have that kind of experience. A lot of us live in apartments. We don't have that kind of experience. Or live in suburbs with tiny caged backyards. And it's just not the same. You can't do that. This is, again, I didn't appreciate this when I was a kid. It's so amazing to me that I come out and do this. The only thing I really remember that I fantasized or nostalgia'd about growing up here was the skies. See, there's a lot of sky here. It's totally flat. There's no mountains. There's no topography. So there's a lot of sky. And the city, Indianapolis, is down that way, 20 miles or 30 miles. There was some light pollution from the city, but I saw the stars here. I spent a lot of time looking at the stars when I was a kid. And that's something that I really have often been nostalgic about, missing the stars. But in my last few years in New York City, I started really appreciating what stars I could see from New York City. I ran into a bunch of stargazers out on the High Line one night, and they all had telescopes, and I got to see the rings of Saturn, and I was like, wow, from New York City. I've always been somebody who loves looking at the sky. Oh, the rain feels so nice. It's cold, but it's cool, but not cold. And I'm just walking around naked, and the dogs are barking. Oh, dogs. Go let them out. Yeah, Michael. I've thought about that, eating the squash blossoms. But you want to make sure that they produce squash, right? If you pull the squash blossoms off before they get fertilized, then they don't make squash. Is that correct? So that's what I definitely remember one place I was gardening that you can eat the male squash blossoms, but not the female squash blossoms because they make the fruit. And if you pull all the female squash blossoms off, you don't have any squash. Good morning, Frank. So I don't know. I haven't done the research yet. Again, there's so many things I'm doing, trying to learn and do with what I'm working with already that there's a lot of other things I haven't learned. And I don't know about the male or female squash blossoms and which ones we could harvest. But yeah, I did think about this big, beautiful squash blossom. I thought, wow, I knew we could batter and fry it. The squash blossom in the compost. And then over here, there's wild beans that have started growing. All of this weed stuff in here is called lamb's quarters, which I have eaten a few times in California and Tennessee, but my mom had never eaten, even though it's grown here for years. So we've been harvesting that and eating it. It's like a wild spinach. It's really good. Birds flying. Birds flying high, you know how I feel. This stuff, I've harvested a whole bunch of, dried it out, used it for salves and tea. It's called plantain leaf. Yeah, there's some little balls on that. It's growing its squashiness. And I think these are wild potatoes. Again, these are just the volunteers. These are just potatoes. There's poison ivy in here, I think. Gotta be careful. But this are the lamb's quarters. Like this whole thing is like a wild spinach. It's really good. Maybe I should take some in for breakfast. Anyway, it's nice hanging out with you. Do you guys want to ask any questions? Because otherwise I'm going to do some qigong and then go in and be with my parents. Do you guys have any questions? Do you want me to tell any stories? Do you want me to make up any answers? Yeah. Yes, Eric. Plantain is good for drawing out, for soothing skin. If you have like poison ivy or rashes or burns or cuts. It's also good if you take internally to clear the lungs, to clear the urinary tract, to help the bladder and kidneys. It's like a super water cleanser, but it's also a good lung cleanser, which is amazing. It's a really, really good plant. And of course, people use the seeds as a bulk laxative. It's the same plant as psyllium. So psyllium husk is the seeds from plantain. All right. Love you. Thank you for saying hello. Have a happy weekend to you.